Good, Neil. It's been a rough weekend, rough week, rough 5 years. And I wanted to incorporate this. My father passed away
I'm
on
so
Thursday.
sorry. Yeah.
Um, we brought in hospice on Thursday, and we gave him his wish. He wanted to die at home. He wanted to be surrounded by family. He didn't want to go to the hospital, and we allowed that to happen for him. But it wasn't easy, to sit there and watch it and actually facilitate it because hospice nowadays, I was the one pushing the medication. They come in and it's a self-serve process like most of medicine has become. So I think with these things, it's a horrible tragedy, but also I think with life is always balanced. Karma seems to always be balanced. With as horrible as it is, it's also a joyful thing. He's not suffering. My mother's not suffering with taking care of him and all the worries. And he's had so many incidents over the past several years. He goes to take a drive and drops his keys and then bends down to pick him up and falls into a bush and scrapes his whole face up.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's been off and on with that for several years now. Um, but the other thing that we were talking about that we wanted to discuss, we were planning on discussing last week, but then when he went sick, I went home. But we were talking about the Manosphere. We wanted to talk. There's a documentary on Netflix. I forget what the introduction to the Manosphere or Welcome to the Manosphere. And it goes. There's a journalist does a documentary, and he's trying to find out what makes these these Andrew Tate prodigy men. What drives them? Where did they come from? And I'm comparing the world. Obviously going back and looking at my father's life and reflecting on the things that he experienced and how the world has changed. In one generation, from him to me to my son. Um, what happened? What happened to man? What happened to the world? Is it better? Is it worse? And like I said, when you called me, I hope you have your track shoes on because
All right.
I don't know where this conversation's going, but I think it's a huge issue. We talk about men's issues all the time, but you know, the Manosphere. I hope you watch it because I think it's worthwhile. But um, it didn't, these guys like these extreme guys, they're taking this men's movement, the ultimate men's movement. They're taking, I mean, I'm jumping in on this manosphere thing, if you will, just defending men and feel the need that I need to defend men. And I need to not just defend them, I need to lift them up because men's egos are trashed and horrible. Um, so this whole men's movement thing here has evolved out of something, and this Manosphere show, this Manosphere movement, has also evolved out of something. And like I said, I look at my father and the life he led. The guy worked his butt off his whole life. He lives in the same house, the same small house that he bought 63 years ago. And his dedicated wife is sitting on the couch day after day after day, watching him die. But she said it 100 times this weekend. Jack, I would do it a million times more. She sat there, hey, can you get me some water? Hey, I need my meds, being her full-time nurse. And we tried to bring people in, and he didn't want people in. He's a stoic man. Um, and we bring someone in and they're like, Jack, we kicked them out. They weren't doing anything. I'm like, but mom can't do it all. She's fine. Really dedicated marriage, and guys like this have become, the evil villain number one in this world. These toxic men, these masculine men. Um, and I don't know who was ever hurt by my father. He was surrounded by his friends and family, and we all did our best to make his wish come true. And when he passed, it was horrible, but it was also great. It was new beginnings. It's like, he got what he wanted. We did a great job, and we honestly we did a group hug. My sister, my mother, my niece and nephew, and they're like, we did it. We gave him what he wanted. we did a great job. And of course, everyone's crying and it's a horrible thing, but we did that for him and all the things he did. And, anymore now, the only men that are really praised are these men who dress up as women, the trans community, that you can't be a regular man, but if you're a man who wants to be a woman, then we'll praise you. And I'm exaggerating that, but it's become a very contentious issue. Um, and I think, like I said, this pendulum of swaying from the traditional man of a generation or two ago to this current world that my son's growing up in. I don't know how to manage it. I don't know how to what to tell my son to do, and what's the source of it and what's right. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that we're in this phase that there's polar opposites in this country right now, and ultimately, men are because of the Andrew Tate movement. There are women who like this, and there are women that can't stand this, and you're going to hear more of the backlash against this versus a man that what they want a man to become. So
Hmm.
that's the hardest part of this is you don't know what women are looking for anymore because everyone's in the transition. Everyone's seeing different challenges. Yes, they are praising specific things like that, but they're also praising men that are not, very masculine anymore. That don't some of the things that made men men have disappeared. You know,
Yeah, and the argument of, I'd rather run into a bear in the woods than a man. We've mentioned this a few times. And I saw another comment on that, and it's like, what percentage of men are rapists? And someone, my sources are not clear and confident, but there was a report, 3.8% of men have been involved in a rape. Um, which is not good. I'm not condoning that.
right,
You've got a 97, 96% chance that if you run into a man in the woods, he's going to help you. He's going to be a part of, but somehow this feminist movement, and not the original feminist movement. I'm not sure what the original feminist movement was, what their intentions were. Um, but this evolution into this not pro-female, but anti-male.
right,
And I've had a woman tell me recently, because I'm interested in this conversation, not to stir the pot, but just where did this come from? I didn't grow up with this. And she said, "Well, I'm not a feminist. I'm a misandrist." I'm like, okay, there's a new word I have to look up, and
yeah,
AI, thank God, or Google, whoever. A misandrist is some who just hates men. It's like
right,
racism against men. So she is proud of the fact that she calls herself someone who hates men. If I said, I'm a racist, I don't like black people, Asian people, whoever people, I would be thrown under the bus and, canceled for all of eternity. But, this woman can, in all consciousness, say, I'm a misandrist. I hate men. I just have bad experiences with men. And whose fault is that? Is that these expectations for men, that men can't ever meet, to give women what they want when they don't know what they want? So they go to the feminist movement, they go to their spokespeople. What do I want? Oh, I want someone who's 6 foot tall, six-figure income, six-pack abs, and a 6-inch member. Like this like rule of sixes that these women have demanded now, has closed off 99% of the world, and they're not happy. They don't, the few that find it are throwing it all over Facebook and Instagram, thinking that that's the norm. Um, how do you meet that? And I always say, like, you know, people say, oh, the patriarchy, this patriarchy that's out there keeping women down. 99% of men in this world are kept down as well. You know, the Trumps and the Epsteins and the, Bill Gates and these guys of the world, they're running the world. Like, if we haven't seen that lately, it's been a mess of a world lately, Neil. And Um, they all seem to be revolving around this blame men for all these problems. Meanwhile, there's a handful of men on some strange island, bringing in women, and who knows what the heck is going on down there. Um, and the 99% of the guys that are sitting around, guys like my father, guys who go to work every day. My father didn't take days off ever. My father never took a day off. He would be forced to take vacation. We didn't travel. It was a different time. Um, and every when he got close to his retirement, he was turning in his vacation hours or sick time hours, PTO time at the end of the year because he hadn't used it and he had maximized as much as he could carry over. Um, Yet he is somehow villainized, and I'm villainized, and my son is villainized because of this 1% of Jeffrey Epstein's on their island. And the women seem to fall for it. And they're supporting the government, the people that be, and they're trashing the men that are, living with and sleeping next to them every day. Am I wrong?
No, I mean it's true. There is a lot of messed up stuff. But how do you kind of get out of this as a man and looking at and then you're looking at the evolution of AI, where if you're a certain unless you're a certain position that you can use your hands, you're being eliminated there too. So they're going through a lot of different challenges. Now, if it's something with your hands, like a surgeon or a doctor, you're still okay. Certain things with and anything with your hands is uh is safe right now. While a lot of these other jobs where everyone just wanted a desk job to do computer, some sort of computers or certain things and creativity is lost. So people are in a very challenging position right now. How
Yeah.
to go?
That, Neil, I mean, I think I was growing up very traditional. The idea of being, retraining myself for a computer role, and even surgeons are, being talked about being eliminated with robotic
Yeah.
surgery, and robotic surgery and has been horrible. I mean, there's some advances, but of course they highlight the advances and they minimize the day-to-day. Most of those hospitals that bought robots, are collecting dust in a closet somewhere because the cases were 3 or 4 hours longer than they had to be, which shortened the number of procedures you could do in a day. It fatigued the staff. A lot of, really, negative results of that, but you don't hear it. So every hospital had to buy a robot so that they could put up a billboard that said, "We have a robot." But then you never used it, or you were being used as a guinea pig for it. So, like I said, the idea of transitioning into a computer world doesn't appeal to me as a man, and I think a lot of the men being left behind. We're we want equality. Women want equality, and I think it's an equality of opportunity. Like we have to recognize that we're different, but have to be able to use our individual skills that we have. And men tend to have more of a physical, hands-on, three-dimensional, fix the problem kind of mindset. And there are some guys who just will never transition. My father would never transition into a computer world. I mean, he would basically, every time I called him on the phone, he's like, "Jack, I can't figure this phone out." You know, it's just some of it's impossible, to expect people to transition this way, and maybe over a few more generations. But what is the flashback? We're creating men that women don't like. It's becoming the brave new world. It's going to be a point where babies are made in test tubes, and men are eliminated. Women are going to be eliminated too, or women are going to be. I don't know who they're working for. They're going to be going to Epstein Island to treat these upper 1% of the world that they're trying to take over. I don't know. I don't know, Neil. It's become. I'm hoping that aliens are somehow involved. That as ridiculous as that sounds, um, with all the things that are going on, and you don't know what's AI, what's AI, what's artificial, what's political, what's propaganda. Um, I think a lot of men are confused about that. Do you agree?
No, I totally agree, and I think this is where the challenge is. And but we've done probably if we did a historical look back at the Industrial Revolution or any huge revolution, it happens, but we're seeing multiple revolutions at once. And that's where our mental health has to get to a specific point. And I think that the retirement has to be studied furthermore too, because when they talked about retirement for men, this is what we want. We want a man to retire. And we have not researched the amount of death that's happened after retirement and how a man is fulfilled with his work. A woman is fulfilled by not just her work, but also her family life, her
Relationship.
child relationships, childhood, grant. So we have taken away the one most important thing from school and everything, striving to whatever your greatest purpose and work has been taken away from men
Hmm.
unless they strive themselves to do it. Workaholics are thrown to the wolves, but yet that is what makes a man uh, feel fulfilled. And
Yeah.
so that's something else to think about.
Yeah, and I could use that analogy. Like I said, my father, my grandfather came to this country, immigrant, worked his ass off, learned the language, was made fun of. Italians weren't white people back then. Italians were
Right.
olives or whatever. We were the wops, we were the dagos. And then suddenly, like in my life, I go from this life of this immigrant, this minority, my father's world. I worked my way through school. I assimilated into the mainstream. Graduated college, graduated medical school, got a residency in orthopedics, one of the most difficult residencies. Um, Succeeded there, served my country in the military, performed overseas mission trips. Bought a big house on the hill. Um, Absolutely the most ridiculous icon of American success. But then, of course, oh, you work too much, you don't spend time in the house, blah, blah, blah. So then you've got the failed marriage, like it's like my father sitting in the same house he sat in for 60 years. My mother never complained. It's like now you get into this doctor's life world, and I've got a massive house and all these things, and no one's happy with it. Oh, I'm depressed, I'm lonely, women still don't, you give them everything and they still want more, or they're not happy with that. So then you got the failed marriage, they got my kids, estranged from my kids. And, like I
But
follow.
there's a movement in women too, and women 50 and over. They're going through the same issues because people aren't staying with the same couple. They're not staying with the same because they're seeing what social media, but they're also seeing the unfulfillment. But I really believe it's because somebody told them that men, the fulfillment of work, but it'd be a very interesting thing to research and
Yeah.
why men are working into their 80s, 90s. Some of
Yeah.
them, it's
And like I
C-suite
said,
people at 80 years old, C-suite.
yeah, like I said, it's you look at it on paper and like you follow the rules, you be the good guy, you go to school, you work hard, and then but the family disappears. My father, he graduated high school, he started working in a grocery store. Then eventually he worked his way into maintenance for the housing authority, became superintendent of the housing authority, and he like I said was surrounded by his family, his friends, his loved ones, in a perfect family ideal situation. And you follow this American dream, and what does it get you in the end? Divorced, the ex takes half your stuff, takes your kids, takes the house. Um, that's your reward for being a diligent man in the world nowadays. And how many guys are in that situation? How many guys are in that situation? They got, big hearts, soft hearts, but a coarse exterior, and everyone judges them on their exterior. Like, oh, he was mean, he yelled at me. Like that intensity that gets you success is suddenly villainized.
Well,
You're in
I
the
think we're about to see a cycle,
yeah,
especially if we stay in wartime, where more young men are going to go back to work, go to war, and you're going to see another cycle happen.
probably.
Cyclically, it happens.
Mhm.
You have we look at the sexual revolution in the 60s, but this is where people have to really look at and wake up every day and say, do they have a purpose in life, and is that purpose meaningful for them? And if it's not, ask why.
Well, yeah, and like I said, for me, it's like I'm not fulfilled because I followed that dream. I wasn't doing anything for me. I was doing it for this American dream of sorts, this pie in the sky, this carrot on a stick, type of thing. And then, this delayed gratification. How many times have I heard about delayed gratification in life, Um, and you do everything right for this delayed gratification, but your family falls apart in the meantime. And you're right with I've heard, I had a friend who used to say this. Um, he was same thing, disgruntled, and he was, pushing on to the red pill, the manosphere, that he'd been beaten up by women, divorced, whatever. And he said, I think the American woman has killed more American men than all of our enemies combined. And that's not a bad idea or thought, from his view, he thought that feminism had killed the souls and spirits of more American men than our enemies had in wars. A radical view. What are your thoughts on that?
You know,
That might have been after a couple beers and some
no,
whatever.
so this is where we are seeing a societal change. But if you don't have the proper mental health, you don't have the proper thing. We see a lot of it's a very difficult thing to look at, and we're going through this societal change. And I'm sure if you study cultures and society that change, look how many people are on edge with the war right now. You're looking at two wars. You're looking at the war in AI, and that's going to be very interesting in the midterms how that war begins with how we're going to limit AI when we're a global society. I think the mistake we won't look at is there are people out there right now looking to take our jobs, and they're not AI, and they're not in this country that are coming, working 18-hour days, studying, building knowledge to want to come to America to have that opportunity. And people just don't know it. So you have the kid that you get to struggle as a man that is like, nope, I'm not gonna put extra effort into my work and my grades. I'm like, kid, this is where we are also in an intellectual battle. People might think AI is making us stupider, but it shouldn't. It should be an intellectual battle because intellectually we need to, as schools embrace technology, and everywhere need to embrace technology and really embrace the knowledge because the biggest challenge, dude, people coming from Asia, people coming from the Middle East, wherever, coming to this country and literally making it and working the 18-hour day because they still see as a man in other countries work is a huge fulfillment, and it's their end all be all. So
And here you're labeled, oh, he's too aggressive, he's too toxic, he's workaholic. You're, the traits that bring people, the ability to use your traits, your hard work, in this country is okay for the foreigners to come here or whoever, for immigrants. Um, but it's somehow bad for the people who were born here to continue to
yes,
perpetuate those traits. I said, and I so many times, my grandfather was an inspiration to me when I was in school. My father was an inspiration, and so many times I could say, how can I complain? My grandfather got on a ship and he came here to this country and he worked his ass off and he was a carpenter. And my father worked his ass off and he was a janitor. And I'm working my ass off to become a doctor. What a great country. And like I said, and it has been, it's been a great career. But now as medicine's turning, and are you really a doctor, or are you just they're using your license to put blame on anything that goes wrong? And it's become like that you can't make your own decisions. The insurance companies are making them, the algorithms and the people that the powers that be and the AI generated recommendations are making the decisions for you, but it's your license, your personal license, and your dedication. And if you screw up, they're going to take that license because you didn't follow the protocol. Well, the protocol was given to me and the insurance company denied it. So I'm just the freaking middleman here, not making any decisions but taking all responsibility. and so close to Boston, it's amazing to me that like this taxation without representation concept has been completely bastardized. I'm taking responsibility without independent allowance of thought. And a lot of physicians are in agreement with me on that. And who benefits and who, it's like the common man anymore is becoming just a commodity. They need us. It's the matrix, it's the matrix. We are the fuel that's fueling the system. Whoever is the system, the hoses are plugged into us and they could pull the plug or manipulate your view on things to such
See,
a,
the Tates aren't wrong on these things. And
yeah.
then they talked about and you hear because they know it, and then and someone like me absolutely knows this, and 90% of the country doesn't. The world doesn't.
Yeah.
What is about to happen?
Yeah. And like
Because they're not watching science fact. But see, this is men thing is because at one point, women don't understand they're going to be women robots, and they're just going to have relationships with them
oh,
or AI. You're the metaverse, the opportunity of another verse that they can go to and never live in the society at all. All of these things are just it's an
well,
interesting thing.
like I said, we were planning on talking about this anyways. And then, with the passing of my father and just, I had a 10-hour drive to Erie and back by myself, of course, lonely man, and, thinking about all these things. And, like I said, it's all interconnected. I don't know what you're going to title this episode, but, death, dying, the manosphere, trannies, and Epstein. I mean,
So I'm just very intrigued about the Manosphere thing. I'm gonna definitely. It's this documentary. Is it pretty much kind of knocking what men were?
no, it's using these guys on the extreme. These guys on the extreme, they're clearly offensive, but they also make no apologies for it. And like I said, I think the men that they interview in the Manosphere documentary um, are not men that I would be proud to be, or not men that I would want my son to emulate to be. Um, but they're getting a following. They have a huge following. They're very wealthy. They're attracting these guys, I think, as a pendulum to what's happened to men. Like I said, if your average man, and especially in this country, is demonized and criticized for being a man, and he gets no support, he's going to look for support. And I think evolution just weeds it out so that the ones who are most attractive to you are the ones who are the complete opposite of the feminist movement. So I mean, I think it's a reaction, and he doesn't really go into that. And I wish he would. I wish he would have gone into that. Like, these men didn't jump out of a vacuum. These men evolved out of what's been happening in the world, and the sense of need that these guys have to be complete misogynists or complete, extreme men, whatever that word means, because they've been encouraged to be extreme not men. And I think I said, I've got the ultimate men's movement. I didn't stay within the confines of this oppressive medical situation, the medical world. But also feeling the struggle, meeting men every day, talking to men, talking to, war veterans, wounded warriors throughout my career. And these guys come in and, this thought that men are superior and men are the evils for all the world. I've not seen it. I've seen guys who've been the victims of it more often than not, but they're not out there complaining that they're victims. They just suffer in silence. They go through their divorce, they get everything taken from them. They come back from war where they've been, leading hundreds of men to, kick ass and take no prisoners. And then they come back here and they give them a nice little job driving a forklift at the Walmart distribution center. And these men are struggling and they're looking for something to boost their morale, so these manosphere guys come out and they're attracted to them. And I can't blame the manosphere guys. I blame the system that created this group of lost men,
Yeah.
that are looking for something. So,
Absolutely. So that's the big challenge for sure. So go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast and go to theultimatemensclinic.com in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and work with Dr. Jack today. Appreciate Dr. Jack.
all right. Thank you, Neil.
All
Big
right, that was the special sound.